All right. Well, in Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. Let me get Arlen on the screen. Actually, we'll have a picture of Arlen because Arlen, unfortunately, and I could not make the video work today. Hey, there you go, Arlen. I got your picture. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right, although I wish I was on camera. I did a lot of work to look really nice. I got my makeup on and everything, and now you're telling me, I can't be seen. Well,
no, I know, and I felt bad, and I kind of blamed myself at first, Arlen, but then I was pleased, or I guess relieved, or I'm not even sure what the right word is, to find that this is apparently a Google Meet problem. Google Meet is the app that we use to speak to each other visually, video phone call as part of this live stream. And as far as I can tell, the problem is across the internet. It's not just unique to us. So at least I'm not blaming myself, which is always good. How are you? So you said you're looking good, though. You're looking so your wife must be pleased, at least.
Terrific. I wish I looked this way every week. No, I'm joking, of course.
So you're saying you look really, really good today, and it's unfortunate that folks can't see you this handsome. Is that the point I'm getting from you?
I think I'm looking like. What's his name? No, forget. Anyway, yeah, I look 20 years younger. How about
Okay. Well, I'm sure everyone will be picturing you in their mind's eye as, 38 years old then, if you're 20 years younger, something like that?
Well, something like, I think I'm looking like George Clooney, perhaps. I don't know.
I was thinking about Clooney, but, he's kind of older looking. Maybe some younger star that I don't even know who their names are anymore. So I don't know. I don't know who the younger stars are. All right, Arlen's with us. We're going to start. We always do this pretty much. We do start with the really down news from Israel, from Gaza, what Israel's doing in the Middle East. And it continues to be terrible. I think the number I got was somewhere over 300 more casualties, Arlen, just since Friday. And yeah, I mean, I'm at a loss, right? I mean, we've been through this before. I don't know that there's any solution. I mean, there's the political solutions we seek don't seem possible at this time, I think. Is that fair to say?
I think the problem is there's nobody to stop Netanyahu. Apparently Trump has no interest in doing it. Our government doesn't. And, so he's pretty much could do whatever he wants to do, which is very similar to what we're dealing with in our country, which is that Trump can do pretty much whatever he wants to do. And what's bothering me the most is I think everybody's afraid of him. I think he no matter who it is, whether you're another government, the United Nations, Congress, courts, everybody's afraid of him because he has such power and he can hurt people. And that's the problem.
Well, one of your, I guess, preferred columnists, I certainly don't want to say a favorite columnist, but someone that I think you think relatively highly of, Ezra Klein, the New York Times, proposes a plan, right, for standing up to Trump. And we're going to get to it. And I think you endorse it. And frankly, surprise to all, I kind of agree with Klein myself. So we'll get to that in just a moment. You see, though, from that, the screenshot there that I put up, the slide, 6 more Palestinians die of starvation in Israel besieged Gaza. 140 children are among the 393 identified as killed by Israel, having been starved to death. And the numbers I've given you, over 200 more Palestinians killed over the weekend, a minimum of 64,522 Gazans, and Trump now close to 12,000 in concert with Netanyahu. Since Trump took office earlier this year, we have nearly 12,000 Gazans killed, 12,000 Palestinians in Gaza, over 5,500 women and children. So Absolutely horrific, Arlen. And Arlen, one thing that's kind of different today, usually I only talk about the victims of Israel when talking about the, I don't know what the right word is, the skirmishes or conflict between Israel and Palestine. But Israel suffered casualties over the weekend. I don't know if you saw this story, but a gunman who was two gunmen identified as Palestinians did open fire near a Jerusalem bus stop over the weekend, killing 6 Israelis, and then they were shot to death by a police officer and apparently a civilian as well. So the war coming home now to Israel.
Yeah, that's not good news. We just don't need more killing, more violence. But I understand things like that will happen and probably will continue to happen. Nancy was telling me about reading about a professor at Berkeley who is going on a fast on behalf of Gaza, and he hasn't eaten for a number of days. And so there are people that feel very strongly about this, of course, like you do, and I agree with you. So, but yet it goes on and on.
Yeah, I do feel for the people in Israel who were killed. I mean, an Israeli life is no more important, no more valuable than a Palestinian life, but it is no less valuable either. That said, I don't know where to go with this. I mean, I don't know how much I would have mourned during World War II to hear that German civilians were killed by Allied bombs. I think they're pretty much the same, actually, the same dynamic there. I mean, Israel has decided it's going to wage war on a group of people, on human beings. So it's really hard for me to muster up, honestly, any sympathy for them. But I suppose
I understand.
They deserve it. Now, I wanted to just point out, it's unfortunate that you can't see the screen, and I want to get your full take on this, Arlen, but I just want to get to something else that I thought was very interesting. I'm sorry that you're not on video, but I put up the Haaretz, which is the Israeli newspaper headline, and Haaretz is pretty liberal, pretty progressive, especially for Israel, and often I think they've shown more empathy for the Palestinians than even some U.S. papers do. But Haaretz here, the headline is 6 killed, 2 in serious condition after terrorists opened fire near Jerusalem bus stop. And the use of the term terrorist is interesting because the West media, the Israeli media, the New York Times never called the Israeli forces terrorists, despite the fact that they're always killing civilians. What I found even more interesting, though, than Haaretz's use of the word terrorist, Arlen, I promise I'll get to you, is that the New York Times, in what appears to be a real shift in their editorial policy, the New York Times does not refer to the shooters as terrorists. Instead, and I'll put the headline up right here as well, and it's in the text of the paper too, in the article. The Israeli police described the shooting as a terrorist attack and said that the perpetrators had been killed at the scene. The New York Times uses the word gunman to describe the 2 shooters. I think that's somewhat interesting. I don't know if that you find that interesting at all, but that at least in this case, they're not using what I think most of us would consider a pejorative term, terrorist, to describe the 2 shooters in Israel.
Yeah. When it comes down to Hal, it's really that people are people, whether they're Israelis, whether they're Palestinians, they should be all treated, equally. Although in the case of what Israel is doing to Gaza, they're overwhelmingly killing more people who are civilians and women and children. And, that's the problem there. But, yeah, I don't think that the use of the word terrorist or any other, like you say, pejorative language is really going to help anything. I mean, people are people. And, that's the bottom line.
I mean, I would be less... I do think they are terrorists, right? I mean, they are using terror as a weapon. It's a political weapon in this case. But it would seem to me so are the Israeli soldiers. So I don't quite know and the reason I say that is because there doesn't appear to be a military goal that they're trying to achieve when they shoot. When Israel, when the Gaza humanitarian forces shoot at civilians, I don't know what their military goal is short of clearing out the region. So I don't even know if you could call them terrorists. I don't know what they're trying to do, except clear out the region completely, either ethnic cleansing, genocide. I think both terms are fair. I do think the shooters in downtown Jerusalem were using terror to try to, I guess, get Israel to stop killing in Gaza. But the term has been used really to dehumanize folks. I don't know where we go with language. I just thought it was interesting that the Times is pulling back here from the term terrorist, which usually is very, very, like I said, pejorative, like you said too. So it's interesting. Maybe there's a recognition that the Palestinian people are really being beset and being unfairly treated by Israel. I don't know. Have you noticed any shift? You read the paper closely, I think, the New York Times.
Yeah, I can't say particularly about the New York Times if it's a shift or not, but every time you use the word terrorist, you're no longer, you're just making things worse, because then you don't see them as people. And, the innocent people are, again, like I say, they're just people. And it's really, it distorts the whole story when you use the word like terrorism. I don't like it.
Arlen, the attack by the two gunmen, the Palestinians, is not the only attack on Israel over the weekend. There was a Houthi drone that made it through the famed Iron Dome and actually hit an airport in Israel, which is interesting. There was one casualty. Apparently it wasn't serious. But Israel is getting hit. They were hit quite a number of times by Iran during their attack when they were attacking Iran. And now Houthi weaponry is also reaching Israel. So my hope is that maybe this causes Israel to reconsider its wars against humanity. But the opposite is perhaps more likely, which is that Israel will retaliate even more aggressively to the extent it possibly can. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I will guarantee you that more and more people will continue to die on both sides. It's inevitable as long as you keep, killing each other. There's going to be more and more killing, more and more deaths, and certainly nothing's going to stop Netanyahu of the sort of things that you just talked about. A few Israelis get killed here and there, but so he will go on and continue his bombardment of Gaza, and the people of Palestinians and those who are sympathetic to Palestinians will continue to use violence when they can, and that's just going to go on.
Arlen Grossman with us. He is the thought leader, political pundit. You can check him out at thebigpicturereport.com. We are going to feature in just a moment a story that Arlen has centered on thebigpicturereport.com. I do want you, though, now, and we'll get to that story in a little bit. Actually, we're going to go to a couple of other stories first. But I do want you now to click the subscribe button right in the middle of your screen there. It's a little bit in the pop-up I just put there, a little bit covered up by Arlen's picture, but we'll do it one more time. Click subscribe now. We do continue to see some growth. I shouldn't say some. We continue to see growth in our subscriber base, which is awesome. Don't forget to click like as well. That always helps us. Any comments, any communications, especially in YouTube, and the YouTube video rather than Facebook is super helpful as well. So that's what I'm asking you to do to help us grow right here at Halitics. Arlen, let's before we get to the suggestion by Ezra Klein, which I think we both agree with, I just wanted to make one more point about the Houthi attack. What Haaretz is saying is that the Houthis feel somewhat liberated to attack Israel because the United States has entered into a ceasefire agreement with the Houthis. The ceasefire does not cover Israel. In other words, the Houthis, under the agreement with the United States, can continue to target Israel, can continue to launch missiles at Israel without, at least according to the terms, at least according to what we understand that ceasefire agreement to be, without violating that agreement with the United States. So Israel isn't quite as, let me say it this way. It does not appear that Trump is quite as protective of Israel as he had been. He is leaving them out there to face the Houthis and Iran as well now without guaranteed protections from the United States.
Yeah, and you could say the same thing about Ukraine. Trump doesn't want to do anything about, limiting Putin from just bombarding Ukraine, which he's doing in, record numbers the last few days, and just escalating his part of the war, Putin's part of the war. But it doesn't seem like Ukraine can do anything about that because the United States under Trump will not help them, and Europe is probably afraid of going in front of Donald Trump. So, it's terrible.
Yeah, well, I certainly think Trump is right not to protect Israel from the Houthis or from Iran. I wish he would not provide them with offensive weapons whatsoever, but I'm glad he's not, at least for now, authorizing or calling for U.S. strikes against Iran and or Yemen. I think that's a very positive development. The situation in Ukraine is very, very difficult. It's very challenging. I'm not sure what the right response is by Trump. What do you want to see? You've consistently been against putting U.S. boots on the ground. It seems as though Putin is unwilling. He's just simply unwilling to enter into any kind of an agreement right now to stop his war against Ukraine, at least without a significant sacrifice or a significant transfer of Ukrainian land either to Russia or at least as a buffer zone that is demilitarized. So what is your sense of the appropriate response by the Trump administration at this point? What should they be doing that they're not?
Well, Putin is kind of like Netanyahu, and who's kind of like Trump. They feel they could do whatever they want to do, whenever they want to do it. And, Putin has tried to say, oh, I want peace, but he, obviously does completely the opposite. Trump has promised to use sanctions against Russia, but he hasn't followed through on that. So so Putin thinks he can do whatever he wants to Ukraine, and he's been doing it. Meanwhile, the rest of the world looks at it and says, oh, my God, this is terrible. And no one's ready to step up and help Ukraine to the extent that they should be helped to knock back Russia. Otherwise,
well, what do you want the U.S. to do? Do you want you haven't changed to a different view about war, right? You don't want us to actually go to war with Russia at this point.
No, of course not. What I want to happen is for there to be peace, of course, and I want Putin to pull back a little bit and make a fair peace agreement with Ukraine, and that would be the best possible scenario that I could think of.
Well, what would you think Trump could do differently than he is now to try to get that to happen?
Well, he had a couple of strong sanctions that he has not followed through with. He's kind of let the deadline go past, so Putin is not going to take him seriously. And therefore, it's just Putin's going to do whatever Putin wants to do, and Russia's going to gain as much ground and regain enough ground and keep enough ground as they like. So I'd like Trump to, use some kind of sanctions against Russia to make them think twice. And I'd like him to help out Ukraine with enough military force that could go against Russia and make them think twice about what they're doing.
I think we are still supplying Ukraine with weaponry, and there have been some sanctions levied against Russia. The ones that Trump had floated, and I think they may be still in effect to a degree, are sanctions against Russian allies. In other words, saying to India, saying to China, hey, don't keep supplying Russia at this point, since they're clearly a bad faith actor. They're not willing to enter into a ceasefire agreement. And that seemed to me to have some promise. At least that's what experts had said. But it seems like Russia right now is pretty self-sufficient. They don't really need anybody's help. And right now, I think this is past the... I think there's nothing that can be done. Russia is bound and determined to crush Ukraine militarily at a minimum. And I guess you just have to keep the talks going, which Trump is trying to do. So I'm not as critical of him when it comes to Ukraine as I think a lot of other people on the left are. There are many areas where I'm critical of him. I just don't know what he can do. And I think this was an area where he's handed a very, very bad deck by the prior administration.
Well, I disagree entirely, Hal. You know, he can really put a lot of pressure on Putin. He can, put more and more difficult sanctions on Putin. He could do a lot, but he's not even criticizing Putin, as far as I can tell. He did for a little while, a few weeks ago, but now he's not saying anything at all. So I think, Trump is not doing anything really to help peace, to help Ukraine, and I see that as very tragic and unfortunate.
All right, let's go to New York City. I don't know if you know about this. There was a tennis tournament that was completed yesterday, and the new world champion, or the new number one, I guess he's not world champ, number one is Carlos Alcaraz of Spain, defeating Yannick Sinner, whose last name sounds German, and it is German, but he's Italian, from the German-speaking part of Italy. So Alcaraz over Sinner, taking Sinner's place as number one. Here, let's listen to the sounds of the crowd. I don't know if you've heard this Instagram, but here is the sound of the crowd at the U.S. Tennis Association Center, the Arthur Ashe Court, I believe it is. Maybe it's the Billie Jean King Court, not sure. Where when Donald Trump's face is placed on the big jumbotron. Here we go. So just the whole crowd erupted in boos. Arlen, you would have just been excited to be there and putting the thumbs down. It was very, very emphatic, no confidence display in Donald Trump. ESPN was told not to play that. Apparently they did not, but it still made it on social media. So my response was, can you imagine how well the Democrats would do in the midterms if they just weren't quite as bad as they are? They may still do okay in the midterms having Trump. See, I think that kind of flies in the face of the argument that Trump is so powerful and that no one can stand up to him. I mean, he's can barely show his head in New York City without being heckled mercilessly for a long period of time.
Yeah. And I follow the polls pretty closely, and Trump is losing some ground in approval. He's not as popular as he was, maybe a month or two ago, and he's dropping, and depending on the economy, he may drop even further. So, he's going to be hurting. But again, for the Democrats, the unfortunate thing is the midterms are more than a year away, and that's too long to wait.
It's true. The midterms are over a year away. On the other hand, there is a looming budget fight. We see this every year, every couple of years, as the latest budget deficit limit is passed, right? Or the debt keeps growing, and when the debt reaches a certain level, Congress has to pass a bill to raise it or shut down the government. And this is what Ezra Klein is saying the Democrats should use. They should leverage that to rein Trump in. I put you can't see it, Arlen, so let me describe it. I put the front page or the front cover. I think it's from the New York Times Magazine. It looks like it. Stop Acting Like This Is Normal by Ezra Klein. I have some sections of the article, but you tell us, what is Klein calling for? What should we stop acting like it's normal, and what should we do about it? Or what should the Democratic Party, Democratic leaders do about it?
Well, first of all, the cover was the cover of the opinion section. They showed a picture of every single Democratic senator, including Bernie Sanders, and what he's asking is for the Democrats not to do nothing, but actually to start doing something. And one thing they could do is stop the funding of the government. And you and I and many of your viewers and listeners will remember back in March when the Democrats could have done that, but Schumer said, no, we're going to cooperate for a little while. And he thought he was doing the right thing, but obviously he wasn't. So now the Democrats have a new chance to, halt the funding. And this is probably what they have to do. It's really necessary. And I think Ezra Klein agrees with that, and you and I agree with it. And I hope the Democrats agree with it.
Well, let me show a couple of couple of the sections from the article. Again, you can't see it. I guess maybe if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you might be able to, but I'll put it up and I'll describe for you what I put on the screen, Arlen, and then you can comment. So what Klein points out is what we already mentioned, is that there's this looming budget deficit or budget debt. I get always confused. I think it's the deficit. The deficit is going to go beyond the annual deficit. It's going to go beyond a certain point. And when that happens, if Congress doesn't increase the allowed deficit, the government has to stop operating or stop operating at a deficit, stop growing the deficit. And basically that will happen in about 3 weeks. So Democrats have a choice: join Republicans to fund a government, in other words, agree to raise the deficit that President Trump is turning into a tool of authoritarian takeover and vengeance, or shut it down. Democrats face a version of this same choice back in March, and they chose, or at least Chuck Schumer made a unilateral decision, I believe, along with maybe other centrists or corporate Dems, not to go to the mattresses against Trump. Now he's saying, Klein is saying, that Schumer should make a different choice. He points out that there's so much corruption in the government. I think he's thinking of those Doge coins, among other things. The way Trump looks at does really seem to be, using the power of the presidency to leverage all sorts of agreements from colleges, law firms, groups he has personal animus with, to get what he wants, to enrich himself. And Klein is saying this has to stop. We both agree, right? This is the correct response.
I think Schumer got a lot of criticism in March, not from everybody, but from many Democrats. And I don't think he saw what was coming, all the horrible things that Trump has done. And now, the Democrat, most Democrats, I think, will say now is the time to change that position that Schumer had before and just say, we're not going to fund this government. I like this last line he writes, joining Republicans to fund this government is worse than failing at opposition. It's complicity. So, yeah, he's saying, if the Democrats fund this government and what Trump is doing, then they're complicit with him. So, yeah, they need to stop the funding.
Yeah, and what Klein says is he agrees with what Hakeem Jeffries said. The problem for Democrats is not a lack of a message, but a lack of power. I think those two go hand in hand. I think if you have a powerful message, you have power. And you can leverage that message to gain power. Even if you may not have enough votes as a party, you can use that message to pressure the opposition and perhaps to peel some people off who are supporting the opposition party.
the problem is, since the Democrats have no power, they can give their message, but it's not going to make a difference. But if they say, we're not going to fund this government anymore, that's going to be something that people will pay attention to, and then they can have a better chance of getting their message across by saying, hey, we don't want what Trump is doing, and this is what we're going to do, what we want to do instead. And I think people would pay more attention to that if they voted against funding this government.
Yeah, I mean, I think they should vote against funding the government because the government is doing really, really bad things, and that they should use their power to force Trump to do better things, to do good things, and to do popular things, to do things. This should be their message. Their message is, this is what you need. This is what you must do if you want us to agree to continue to allow the deficit to grow. You must do this and you must do that. And that should be their message. And it should also be part of a message that this is what we will do next year if you elect us and you give us power. And even surprisingly enough, centrist, corporate M, whatever you want to call him, moderate, third way, as Recline, he makes this point, or I'm going to put it on screen. Right now, he says right now, what you said, right now Democrats have no power. I disagree. I just don't buy that. I do not believe that Democrats have no power, but they have less power. So no one cares what they have to say. I disagree. People do care. A shutdown would make people listen, but then Democrats would have to actually win the argument. They would need to have an argument. They would need a clear set of demands that keeps them on the right side of public opinion and dramatizes what is happening in the country right now. You agree with that, correct? And I do too, by the way.
Well, again, I disagree with you. If you say Democrats have power, they have absolutely no power, except possibly in this instance, not funding the government. And so people are not going to pay attention. And Trump's going to do anything he wants because, again, the Democrats don't have the power to stop him. So this at least would draw attention to what the Democrats want to do and what they're trying to propose. No,
I know you don't agree with me when I say the Democrats don't have power. I don't want to argue that point particularly. What I was asking you was whether you agree with Klein, where he basically says what you said. A shutdown would make people listen. This is Klein talking, not Hal. A shutdown would make people listen, but then Democrats would have to actually win the argument. They would need to have an argument. They would need a clear set of demands that keeps them on the right side of public opinion and dramatizes what is happening to the country right now. That's all Ezra Klein. And I do think maybe I'm wrong. Do you agree with that as well?
Well, I think, what you're saying is that, the Democrats could put out what they want and all that, but I just don't see any point of doing that because it's not going to get anywhere. So, yeah, I agree with Klein that, they have to start, stop funding the government, make people pay attention to what they're going to do. And then I think people will start looking at those things. And by the way, how last week we talked about how the average American really believes in the things that Democrats do, like Social Security and health care and so on and so forth. But, they can't get that because the rich people and Trump control the Republican Party.
Right. So I think what Klein is saying, though, is that if the Democrats are going to shut down, I think he is saying if the Democrats are going to actually refuse to give Trump the supermajority in the Senate, that is essential to raise the deficit. He doesn't need any votes in the House because they have a majority of Republicans, and you don't need a supermajority in the House of Representatives, but you do in the Senate. What Klein is saying is when the Democrats refuse to support lifting the deficit, they need to say, this is what we insist you do. If you want our votes to lift the deficit, we need you to do these things. And they need to present an argument why they need Republicans to do those things. I think that's what Klein and I are both saying. And I think I'm sort of surprised here you push back against that. Maybe I'm not explaining it clearly.
Well, I understand you've been saying all along that Democrats need to tell everybody what they're going to do and make a case, and you're right. But I think what Klein and I am saying is that first of all, they've got to get the attention of the American people, and the best way to get the attention of the American people is to threaten to stop the government funding, and I think that's about the only way that they're going to get more attention. Because again, they don't have any power. So,
well, what Klein is saying is if they're going to shut down the government while they're shutting it down, they need to explain to the American people why they're shutting it down and what they demand in return for letting it be reopened. Klein says that. That's what Klein is saying.
Yeah, well, we all agree that. Yeah. Well, we all agree that the Democrats have to push their message out. It's just this is just one way of doing it that's probably better than most.
So what message do you think the Democrats should be pushing out? What should be their demands? What should be their conditions to Trump, which they say that Trump must meet if they want their votes? Because that's where Klein falls down. He says there should be conditions.
Yeah. In
my opinion, he falls down. He says there should be conditions. The Democrats need to agree on a message, but then he doesn't really. He specifies it to agree. He says they should talk a lot about Republican corruption, which I agree with, but he doesn't really give a specific list of what the Democrats should demand from Trump in return for their votes to lift the budget deficit allowable. So I guess what I'm asking you is, what do you think the Democrats should demand from Trump?
I honestly think that the Democrats would realize that they have to come across with a better message, and I think what the message should be, hey, we're for the working people. We want to help things that will help average middle-class working Americans, and instead, Trump is giving all his money and attention to those who are in the higher tax brackets, and he doesn't care about working people at all. So this is what the Democrats need to do. So they need to push Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, enough money to fund things that will help the average American. And I think the Democrats can make a strong case that way.
So I made a list of 5, and you kind of mentioned some of them, but I put these on screen, and you added one which I didn't have in mind because I was looking for 5, but I think it's very good. So I have cut off Israel, release the Epstein files, and partly this is for political reasons too. I mean, I think these should be done, but I also think by making these public demands in return for agreeing to keep the government running, the Democrats would enhance their standing with independent voters and make it more likely they'll win more seats next year. So part of this is for political reasons. Part of this is for the good of the country. Cut off Israel, release the Epstein files, fully fund Medicare and Medicaid, raise taxes on the wealthy, restore funding for national parks. I think all of those would be very, very popular. Arlen, one you mentioned that I didn't put on this list is protect Social Security. And I think that's right there as well. Maybe you could put that with fully fund Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. But I would say those are all, if the Democrats made it very clear, those were their conditions for raising the budget deficit so that Trump can continue to run the government. I think that would make them more popular if they did that.
Absolutely. I think you and I and Ezra Klein would agree on all those things. And I think, if the American people will believe that the Democratic Party is really going to be doing those things, that should make a big difference. And, maybe I hope it wouldn't Democrats wouldn't have to wait until next year, November, but at least, I think that'll energize the Democratic Party and the space and, give them a better chance. Because right now, Trump is in total control, and, that's just not working.
Thought leader Arlen Grossman with us. I did not ask for calls because Arlen's using our phone line right now. We could not get him on video. Hopefully, the problem with the Google Meet will be resolved shortly, and for our next videos, we'll be able to use it again. I certainly like that app very, very much. There are workarounds, but I wasn't in a position to work around to build them at this short notice. So we're doing Arlen by phone. Arlen, Ezra Klein expresses concern that Democratic leadership is not up for this fight, that they're not really ready for it. They may not be equipped to take on Trump. And he says that in a manner that makes it clear he's very critical of Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. He also expresses concern that they won't be able to agree on a message. So two related concerns that Klein raises. One, the leadership really isn't going to be able to fight this fight in an effective manner. And two, they won't be able to come up with an effective message or an agreed upon, maybe a better way to say it, agreed upon. The Democratic Party is just too diverse. The political views that some on the left have among the voters versus the more conservative, pro-Israel, pro-corporatist Democratic wing, there's just too great a gulf for them to agree. Your thoughts on that concern?
I'm not worried about that. I'm sure the Democrats would come up with a message that's entirely different from what Trump and the Republicans want, and it should be easy, I think, to convince people that these are good things. All the things you mentioned, they're good things, and I think there's enough Democrats that will come together and they will agree on all these things. I'm sure Bernie Sanders would agree with those things. I'm sure AOC would agree with those things. So I don't see any problem at all there.
Well, the Democrats will not agree to cut off Israel. That's one thing they will not agree. Now, many will, and it seems that there may even be a majority in the Senate of Democrats since they voted for the Sanders bill. But that would definitely split the Democratic Party. And I recognize that, but I still make the suggestion because it would be very popular, because it would make the party more viable for many millions of Americans as an option. But I don't think that you could get the 85-90% of Democrats necessary to vote to support that, for one thing. So I wanted to make another point, Arlen. You can respond to that, but right. I'm going to put on the screen this X comment, this tweet. I guess they're still called tweets, even if it's X. So this is from our good friend Unusual Whales. Unusual Whales is always tracking the stock market and really focuses a lot on insider trading by legislators, by politicians, by people who have insider information. So that's why it's insider trading, and mainly financial issues. I thought this was a really interesting tweet, Arlen. I want to get your face on, since we can't get your your video. So here we're going to get the Arlen photo to represent. But here's what the tweet says from Unusual Whales. Tariffs will lower deficits by $4 trillion over a decade, the Congressional Budget Office has said. So this is one of the positives about tariffs that are never mentioned. I'm a fan of tariffs. That's why I didn't put tariffs on my list of demands from Trump to support lifting the budget deficit. But because tariffs, demand payment from importers to the government gets money, and that means it addresses the deficit. So that is a real positive, and I just wanted to make that point.
Well, I think, tariffs are going to be something that we don't really know how it's going to turn out, because Donald Trump is doing it in a way that nobody else has ever done it before. And then you have to also think about that the courts are saying he has no right to determine the tariffs, and therefore we're going to cut him off. So that'll change things too. So
you're absolutely right, Arlen. I'll just jump in. We agree 100% on that. I think where we might disagree is I think the Democratic Party should actually, and I didn't put it on the list, but maybe use the tariffs as part of their argument. Say, okay, we don't oppose tariffs unilaterally. And in fact, Joe Biden didn't even repeal the Trump tariffs. We don't oppose them, but we demand that it be done in a politically objective way, that you don't just, like you just said, Arlen, you don't just willy-nilly slap tariffs based on, what the Ouija board tells you is the right tariff, but that you appoint people to the FTC, and that you have a commission or a board within the commission that makes these recommendations to Congress and makes recommendations to you.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Brazil. Trump has a problem with Brazil because they were mean to the person that was leading them that was pro-Trump. So now he's slapped a 50% tariff on Brazil, which is totally unfair. And that means the price of coffee and a lot of other things that we get from Brazil will be going up. And, it just makes no sense. So they're not smart. Some of the ones he does are not smart.
100%. Yeah. And it's petulant, it's immature, it's weaponizing them, which shouldn't be the point at all. I think we both agree, and maybe I'm always getting nervous if I say we both agree, but I think we all agree, including Democratic leadership, that protecting Americans' existing health care rights under the Affordable Care Act, Medicare, Medicaid, should be one of the top priorities of their message in their fight against Trump when it comes to the budget. Would you agree there that, yeah, I think we already agreed to that.
Yeah.
The Democrats say that they will prioritize healthcare, that they are going to fight tooth and nail to protect Americans' healthcare rights. That's a good thing, Arlen.
Yeah, it is. And there's another issue where we haven't talked about at all that I think people are starting to pay attention to, and that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and some of his views and how that could change, the way Americans get their health care and, cause, the not using vaccine could cause a lot of health problems for Americans. So I think that's part of it, too.
My wife told me, I haven't seen it, that apparently Trump tweeted out something positive about vaccines over the weekend. Did you hear that?
No. But, he should, after the kind of testimony that RFK Jr. gave last week. I mean, he should have just fired him on the spot, but obviously Trump doesn't want to do that until he's ready to do it.
Let me just put this on screen. A lot of times Trump says several different things that seem to mean different things, and you can kind of find in his, it's like a Rorschach picture, right? You can find what support for whatever position, whatever you want to make of one of his statements, you can find support. He's not that radical. He is that radical. He supports, you can find that. But this is what apparently he said, as best I can come out with. President Trump says Americans should take vaccines that are not controversial. I think we have to be very careful, Trump said when asked about Florida's plans to phase out vaccine mandates. Look, you have some vaccines that are so amazing. So right there, he is breaking with RFK Jr., who, as far as I know, Arlen, has never touted any vaccines. He said, well, some of them are maybe effective, but he never identifies them and he never speaks positively about them. Trump, on the flip side, said he does certainly support the polio vaccine, for example. And also, he even said the COVID vaccine was helpful. Now, I'm not surprised since he was there when it was developed. So, he's kind of taking a victory lap there. But it's kind of interesting. He's not backing his guy all the way anyway.
Yeah, but he's probably feeling a lot of pressure. I mean, you saw Republicans really going after, especially the doctors going after RFK Jr. in that testimony. And, they were dumb enough to, nominate him, but now at least they're starting to criticize him. And also you got to consider that RFK Jr. is just disbanding people, a lot of people in his department who do believe in, vaccines and other more conventional health care. And he's putting in people that have a philosophy closer to his own. So, I think eventually I think Trump is going to have to get rid of RFK, in my opinion.
I think he picked RFK because he had made a deal with RFK. RFK was polling 2-3%, maybe 4%. He wanted RFK Jr. on his side. RFK Jr. went to Kamala first, asked her for concessions in return for endorsing her. At least that's the scuttlebutt. He actually wanted to endorse the Democrat first. She rebuffed him, and so he went to Trump as a second choice. I'm not saying she was wrong to rebuff him. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that a lot of this was just pure politics.
Well, Trump will do things like that. We know that. I mean, just like he's doing in the New York mayor race, by trying to get some of the opposition away so that it'll leave a clear path for Cuomo over Mondani. So, yeah, I mean, Trump's going to do those things. He'll do whatever he can to gain advantage politically.
Cuomo, you mentioned the Cuomo-Mondani race. We'll get to that in just a moment as well. I want to mention that, but you talked a lot about Arlen. I think certainly more than I do. You focus on the power that the Democrats allegedly lack, and of course they do lack it. I mean, it's not just that they allegedly lack it; they do lack power. I just think they have power to the bully pulpit. They have the power to recruit Republicans on some issues. They have the power to rally public support against Trump actions, and they haven't done that. So I think that's where we disagree. But I want to read to you this. The reason I bring that up is, again, Hakeem Jeffries has said, and I showed this on screen. You didn't see this, but it was consistent with what I had said earlier, that Democrats are going to fight tooth and nail for healthcare protections for the American people and to protect the rights they already have. This is what a White House official responded to that statement. There will be no negotiations with Democrats over reversing health provisions that are central to the main legislative achievement of Trump's second term so far. Democrat threats to shut down the government down over foreign aid, which is what I said, they should threaten to shut the government down over aid to Israel. Demands to limit the president's power, attempts to reverse his signature legislation. I think the signature legislation are massive cuts to health care. Are not in good faith and would not have been taken seriously by any prior administration, the official said. So, what should be the Democrats' response to that? That we are not going to negotiate with you over this?
Well, that's why the only thing they really have right now is by not funding the government. If they threaten to not fund the government, then that's going to cause problems for the Trump administration. So that's the power that they have, and people will start to pay attention, including Republicans will start to pay attention.
Well, I think they should say, no, there will be negotiations. You want to be president? You want to have the power of income, of the office with funds? Then you will talk to us, period. End of story. And you'll talk to us about what we want to talk to you about. Not, you don't get to just tell us what the parameters of the conversation are. That's what they should say. They should laugh at the spokesperson's face. No, you don't get to tell us what's on the table. We'll tell you what's on the table. That's how I think they should respond. But again, Jeffries and Schumer, I'm very, they're not, in my view, I think they've demonstrated they're weak and they're corporatist and that they're not going to go to the mat when it's important to the American public if their funders, their donor class, doesn't agree with that, with what the American people want.
Sure, I'd like to see different Democratic leadership too. Schumer definitely should go. He's too old and too corporatist. Now, you did say that Hakeem Jeffries kind of disagreed with Schumer back in March and all that, but still, they needed somebody with a little bit more power, more fight in them than Hakeem. He's pretty much a mild-mannered leader, and they need some fiery leaders, I think.
Well, his continuing refusal to endorse Mondani, I think, is very troubling. He and Trump see it the same way. Both of them would prefer Andrew Cuomo to be governor. Or mayor, I'm sorry. Former Governor Cuomo to be New York City mayor.
Well, yeah, that's why we need to get rid of the Democratic leadership, and I hope somewhere along the line that they have the desire and the strength to do that, because I think it's totally necessary.
Arlen, I'm going to play a clip here. You'll be able to hear it. You can't see, I don't think, but this is a bipartisan group demanding the release of the Epstein files. I mentioned that should be part of the Democratic demands to continue to fund the government because it's very popular. This is what the American public want. And it's popular among MAGA. MAGA wants those Epstein files released. So this is it would be a very astute political move for the Democrats to join with some Republicans who are both going to be in this video. So I'll play it in a second. But again, this is an area you said they don't have power, but they do have power when they join forces with some Republicans. And they've often been unwilling to do that. Any thoughts, or do you want me to just go ahead and play the clip here? We see Marjorie Taylor Greene on screen right now, but the clip doesn't begin with her. So let me start it. These are the Epstein survivors who are very irate now at the president.
Mr. President Donald J. Trump, I am a registered Republican, not that that matters because this is not political. However, I cordially invite you to the Capitol to meet me in person so you can understand this is not a hoax. We are real human beings.
All right, let me stop that for a second because Trump had made a statement that the so-called outpouring of calls for transparency with respect to the Epstein files, he called that a hoax, sort of a media hoax, and that just a few people like Marjorie Taylor Greene were promoting this. But that Republican victim, I believe, of Epstein was making it clear, no, this is real. These are real. We are real people who were hurt, and we need closure. So it's very powerful, Arlen, and I think Democrats are wise, and I think they have been better on this issue than on some others.
Yeah, they definitely have to go to the mat on this one. And the American people definitely want to, see what's in the files. And, a lot of Republicans did for a while, and then they caved when Trump told Speaker Johnson, hey, we can't, this is bad for us. So, you can't vote for releasing the files. So everybody pretty much caved in except for maybe 3 or 4, Marjorie Taylor Greene among them. So, but I think what worries me too, if they ever do release the files, how do we know that's the real files? How do we know that some of it isn't taken away? I mean, the Justice Department under Bondi is controlled by MAGA, by Trump and his people. So I don't know that we're going to get the actual true files or if they're going to disappear. But if you have those women there, they're going to be harder to disappear. They're going to, demand to be heard. And I hope the American people will, latch on to that and say, yeah, we can't just ignore them.
All right, let me play a little more from this clip. I think that it's very tough to only release some files. I mean, whenever there's redactions, you can see where the redactions are. If there's testimony that isn't included, people from the grand jury will say, well, wait a sec, we heard, you'll have journalists who will go to the grand jury members and say, what was actually said? Is this included? So it's tough to cover up or just simply excise evidence. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not saying it isn't done. I'm saying it raises its own troubles. Sometimes the cover up is worse than the crime.
I've never done a press conference with Marjorie Taylor Greene before. I've done some with Tufts, but look, this country is divided.
Oh, I missed. I didn't want to cut that off. There's
Mr. President Donald J. Trump.
There's
political.
Ro Khanna. Let's jump to
ahead
a little
to the
bit.
Capitol to meet me in person so you can understand this is not a hoax. We are real human beings. This is real trauma.
I've never done a press conference with Marjorie Taylor Greene before. I've done some with Tufts, but look, this country is divided and exhausted. This is one thing that we can come together on.
So this isn't one political party or the other. It's a culmination of everyone worked together to silence these women and protect Jeffrey Epstein and his cabal. And this is not just rich, powerful people. Think his drivers, his maids, his chefs, all the people, people that worked in his home, security guards.
All right, so a lot of pretty powerful statements there, Arlen.
Yeah.
Do you have any optimism that anything much will come of this?
Well, I think it should, because those women can actually name people. You know, they may, you know, get rid of the files or whatever, but these women, you know, have a story to tell, and they can name names, and they could cause, you know, trouble for Trump, and so that's why I'm so happy that they're there, and that at least we have real people who can, you know, tell their real story.
Yeah, I mean, you just want, and you mentioned causing trouble for Trump, and you know, I don't have a problem with that as long as he's guilty, which he certainly appears to be, have some complicity in this or some actual guilt as a predator, a sexual predator. We've seen that before. I have no problem with that. I think that what we really see here is the elites, the richest, the most powerful people internationally, together conspiring to and really committing a terrible crime. And so we want to see some of those folks pay the consequences for that. You folks, anything else on that? And then I've got on the screen now your front page right now, your homepage of the Big Picture Report and the Tom Hartman piece. But you had something else you wanted to say about the situation involving Epstein files?
Yeah, I think, you know, the big important names, prominent people and all that, they're pretty much have been kept hidden so far. And the Democratic Party has to take part of that blame too, because, you know, they've allowed all this to go on and all the secrecy when they could have exposed a lot of things. So it's the entire government. It's all the, you know, average people against people, you know, the elites who have the big names and could get, you know, really hurt. So, it's a powerful message that these women are giving, and I'd sure hate to see people give up on that.
I hesitate to ask this question. I actually wanted you to talk about the Tom Hartman article that you're centering on the Big Picture Report, but you know, you do see Marjorie Taylor Greene out there taking on the White House when it comes to the Epstein files. She's also taken on the White House when it comes to funding Israel's Iron Dome. I mean, do you have some kind of grudging respect for somebody that I think you in the past have had held in a lot of contempt?
Yes, I do. I do have respect for Marjorie Taylor Greene because she's one of the very few, you know, MAGA people and representatives that have actually stood up and, you know, to Trump and Johnson and all the other MAGAs. So, yeah, I do have respect for that. Even Joe Rogan wants to see, you know, this exposure. So, you know, this is a powerful, you know, issue.
Yeah, Joe Rogan isn't quite the right winger that I think some allege him to be. Again, he did endorse Bernie, I think back in 2016, maybe in 2020 as well. Or maybe he did endorse him in 2020, maybe in 2016 as well. I'm not sure about the dates. There's, you know, it's not just a clear line, whereas if you're on the right, you support Trump, and if you're on the left, you supported Harris. To me, that doesn't really fully capture the schisms in American society or the voting patterns of Americans. Getting to the Hartman article, when the court says, this is actually from, again, Arlen can't, you know, he's on the phone, so may not be seeing the slide, but when the court says Trump is above the law, who protects the 11 dead on that boat? And then the subheadline, by Tom Hartman, by protecting him, meaning Trump, from accountability, the court gave him power to end lives at will, and he's wasting no time using it. Why did you want to repost that article, Arlen? Why did it speak to you so powerfully?
Well, when we started the show, I said, I think everybody is afraid of Trump, and I think that is the problem. Trump can do whatever he wants, and there's nobody that's going to say no, hardly anybody that's going to say no. So he could, he could flout international law. He could, break all kinds of rules and laws, and he's been doing it all along. And who's going to stop him? Democrats can't stop him. And, this is something the United Nations should be, on his case for just bombing this boat that, without any kind of evidence or proof or trials and, out in the middle of international waters, that's just not right. And, I think that pretty much tells you that Trump thinks he can do whatever he wants at any time.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, and I agree with Hartman. Trump simply ordered human beings erased, confident the court had given him immunity from any consequence, and the leaders of his military would obey an illegal order. 11 souls were sacrificed not just to his cruelty, but to a judicial betrayal that transformed the presidency into a license to kill. So that's very powerful words by Hartman, and I agree with you and Tom that that was a terrible thing that Trump did. It was a lawless thing that Trump did. But here's where I think Hartman goes too far. When he says that this transformed the presidency into a license to kill, haven't we already seen that? And I'm going to just put on screen, you can't maybe see this, but this is a headline from the Council on Foreign Relations, Dateline January 2017, and they go into great detail all the innocent civilians Obama killed with his drone strikes. They don't talk about American citizens, but some were. As far as I know, the strikes were conducted often in nations where there was no there's no declaration of war. There wasn't even active hostilities necessarily, including allies like Pakistan or so-called allies. American citizens were sometimes killed, many innocents. Didn't Obama also have a license to kill?
Yes, he was wrong. He shouldn't have done what he did. And just because, Obama did it doesn't make it okay for Trump to do the same thing or worse. So, it's a bad precedent that Obama started, and it should be stopped, and international law needs to be, followed and observed.
You said something there, Arlen, that I actually agree with, where you said what Trump is doing is worse than what Obama did. And certainly what Obama did in terms of the drone strikes was worse than George W. Bush. I think George W. Bush's war on the people of Iraq and was a terrible, terrible thing, and certainly the torture. But Obama certainly ramped up the drone strikes. That said, my understanding is Trump continued the drone strikes. So I don't want to give him any pass there or any kind of like an attaboy that he discontinued the drone strikes. He continued them. But as you said, Obama set the precedent. And this is really where I have a problem, I guess more with Tom Hartman, is it seems, and also with Robert Reich, with some of these so-called leftists, they become, to my way of thinking, and tell me if I'm wrong or why I'm wrong, hacks, because they only point the finger at Trump and at Republicans, even in situations where it's clear Democrats have done similarly bad things and similar things.
Yeah, I think you're right, Hal, and it is, something very unfortunate, and they should have been criticizing those things. But I think at this time, what they're going to concentrate on is who's in power now and who's doing the things that are illegal and immoral and all that, and that's Trump. So that's where their focus is. But you're right; they should have been criticizing those other things too,
or at least mention it in your article about Trump. I mean, I'm not saying if you overlooked one speeder, that doesn't mean the next speeder gets a pass. But it certainly gives rise to the suspicion that you're acting in a hyper-partisan way if you call out a president from a different party, and in that call out you ignore the precedent as that the president from your party set. And I think that's also true of the tariffs. I think you make a great point, and I don't disagree with it at all, that Trump's imposing his tariffs in a particularly reckless and irresponsible way, and the benefits that accrue from them are greatly reduced to the extent there are still benefits because of the way Trump is implementing the tariffs. but still he is implementing tariffs. And that's something that Tom Hartman, for, as far back as I can remember him being on the old radio station, always talked about the importance of tariffs, as did Bernie. And it would seem to me they could acknowledge that tariffs in their view are good, but they don't really like the way Trump is implementing them. I haven't heard that. Maybe I missed it, though, to be fair to them.
Yeah, I think right now the Democrats are thinking, well, the word tariffs is unpopular right now, and the major media has made a big thing about them, how dangerous and how they're going to, increase inflation and all that. But but you're right. There are positive things that tariffs can do, and those people have talked about those positive things, but I think they're afraid to talk about them in a positive way, now that Trump is so strong about it.
Well, Trump, before we go, so Arlen, we've been well over an hour. We got through the stories we had promised to discuss. I don't really have anything. We could talk. I have more to talk about if you want. We could talk. Let's just talk a little bit about the Mamdani race. Since we did bring it up earlier, the booing, the really loud booing at the U.S. Tennis Association championship there, to me does, and it's a New York crowd, of course. I think that's got to bode well for Mamdani, don't you? I mean, Trump has made it absolutely clear he supports Cuomo. This would, I think, the fact that the old enemy of my enemy is my friend. If my enemy is Trump, and Trump makes it clear his enemy is Mamdani, doesn't that help Mamdani in New York City, where Trump is extremely unpopular?
Of course it does. And right now, Mamdani has a lead in the polls, and he should, have an easy time, I think, winning the mayor race. So I think, but I think some of the Democrats, some of the moderate Democrats are really making this a little bit worse by calling Mamdani, a socialist and all this, and maybe we shouldn't have him running New York. But Mamdani brings a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of good points, and I think, he deserves to win, and I think he will win.
Yeah, let me just say, with regard to people like Jeffries and Schumer's who are refusing to endorse Mamdani, I think it says to me, and I want your response, all their talk or their talk about loyalty to the Democratic Party and the importance of building the party and of winning elections is hollow, because we see a young, attractive, appealing, intelligent Democrat who is drawing big crowds and who clearly has tapped into voter anger at the status quo. And their point blank refusal to support him says to me that it's more important to them to placate the donor class, to placate business elites, than it is even for Democrats to regain power. Your reaction?
Well, absolutely. And the Democrats, that's why they need to change their leadership. With Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries and all these moderates, they're not going to want somebody like Mamdani, but he is what the Democrats, I think, really need right now. Somebody with his enthusiasm, with his ideas, and I think he'll be a good thing for New York. And I hope he'll eventually be running for an even higher office than mayor of New York.
All right, Arlen, that concludes my slides for today. But I always give you the last word when you're my guest. I give all my guests the last word. Were there areas where we didn't delve that you wanted to go, or where you didn't get to completely provide your opinion?
The only thing I can think of right now would be the Democratic Party's position on Israel. They don't have to say, I think what they should say is, yeah, we support Israel and we want Israel to exist. But the type of policy that we're having now and Netanyahu is doing is just the wrong ones. And, they have to stop all that, killing of civilians, and that, in other words, they could make a position, I think, that would be kind of, modern enough that they could get all the Democrats to support and still have some substance.
Would you agree with this, since you brought this up? I mean, a big concern, look, I'm not even a Democrat anymore. I registered as a Green. But if I were still a Democrat and even looking at the party, I think, or if I were a loyal Democrat, a big concern I would have is the variety of opinions within the party. You have AIPAC, elected Dems. You have, someone like a Wes Bell in St. Louis who got $12 million from AIPAC. You've got Richie Torres in the Bronx, who's an AIPAC darling. And then you have Muslim Congress members, including Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, who are understandably appalled and horrified at what Israel is doing. Does this suggest to you, as it does to me, that the party really will not be able to agree on a message, on a coherent message that would be popular with the American people?
Well, I like to think there is room for compromise. I mean, the Democratic Party has always been split among all kinds of different, philosophies and areas, and so has the Republican Party until the last few years, when they all had turned MAGA and pro-Trump. I mean, they used to have, differences within their party too, but not anymore. And the Democrats, I think they could come together on some kind of language that would, be at least popular enough to pass.
Arlen, you get the last word. It's great having you on. It always is. I'm hopeful, and I've said this before, I actually do like having Arlen on Tuesdays. We've had 2 Arlen Mondays in a row. I'm expecting next week we'll have an Arlen Tuesday. I'll be back tomorrow with Halitics. Thanks so much for being part of this podcast.